What's up, guys, and welcome to my 2025 Worlds tier list video. This video is going to be done a little bit differently. It'll still be a ranking of like 1 to 16, the way that I see these teams, but I've decided to change the categories not to just be S to F tier. And before people get confused, even if something is like an expected top 4, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to have 4 teams in there. It's just that the teams in there I expect to be top 4. And then for the top 8 and top 12, the way that I'm going to do that is these teams have their own expectations to be top 8. There will be more than 8 teams in my top 8 plus, but a lot of how Swiss ends up working now that we've seen the bracket a couple times is that one of these teams is just going to get fucked. It's probably going to be KT, right? KT is probably going to have a horrible draft. They're going to have to play against ridiculous opponents in Swiss stage, and they'll get eliminated without actually getting a good shot at it. Whereas, you know, maybe FlyQuest or G2 or CFO, one of these teams will have a much easier path, and they'll be able to make top 8 without having to go through the struggle. So a lot of this will end up being bracket dependent. The one thing about this format at Worlds, we've seen this a bunch of times, is that you don't really get a very good ranking of teams like 1 through 16. You normally get the best team, where it's like the winner of the tournament is normally the best team. When it comes to like who's actually the second best team all the way to 16th, it's very hard to know exactly where teams rank. They'll be in a general category, but for example, 2023, I would argue JDG was the second best team in the world after T1 that year at that tournament. They ended up going out in semifinals, whereas Weibo went to finals. I don't believe anyone thought that Weibo was a top 2 team in the world. 2024, Hanwha Life is a team that went out in 8th place, which is the same place that FlyQuest went out, but we saw FlyQuest play against Hanwha Life at this tournament. Still think Hanwha Life was a better team than FlyQuest at that point. Could have obviously chose other teams for this, but you get the general concept that I'm trying to show you guys here, is that it's very hard to get a real ranking when the tournament is over. You normally just have a general ranking of, oh, this team looked pretty strong, and you rank teams based off that, or you assess them based off that. So let's start with our number 1 team, which is going to be Gen G. They've essentially won everything you can this year. They didn't win Winter when it comes to LCK Cup and First Stand, but those were Mickey Mouse tournaments. Honestly, LCK Cup was pretty good, but once we got into what the normal calendar year is, they would be on pace for a Golden Road. Obviously, Spring didn't have the playoffs, but they were the number 1 seed coming out of LCK. They ended up winning MSI and EWC one summer, and now they are going into Worlds as the 1 seed from Korea. Just one of the strongest lineups we've seen. I mean, I think the thing that makes Gen G so scary is when you go into a best of 5 against them, there are so many different comps that they are willing to play, and there's so many different champions that they play extremely well that it feels extremely hard to beat this team in a game 4 or game 5. I feel like the best chance you have of beating Gen G is beating them early on in a series. I know KT did end up beating them in 5 games, but I feel like Gen G right now, they're extremely standard in their approach in the first couple games, which I think is one of their flaws. Like, they don't do a lot of creative things that you see other teams do. If you look at T1, for example, Owner was ganking level 3. He was hitting you with a lot of like level 3 bot ganks. You have Carrier, who likes to play he likes to make side lane plays right before objective spawns. They have these types of things that they can rely on in games to get ahead, whereas Gen G a lot of times plays things in a pretty standard way, especially in the early mid game. I think once you get to late game, they get more creative. One thing that ends up coming to mind is the Camille play that Keen had, where, you know, he was playing Camille into Ambessa. His team baited them towards Baron while he soloed Drake. I think that's a really good play from Gen G. And it shows that their intellect as a team. But I think that this team is exceptionally more scary when you get into game 4, game 5, because I feel like they can play everything. You know, like their bot lane can play all these types of different champions. Pyke is one. Blitzcrank is one for Duro that he starts pulling out in later games of a series. It doesn't seem like most teams have a good answer to it, especially with the way they pick it. They pick it in extremely smart times for it. You have Ruler, who can obviously play things like Kalista. There's not that many good Kalista players at this tournament, but it still has value. It's still something that you can pick. And then when you go to Chovy, he can play TF. You know, he can play Ahri if he needs to. He can play Lissandra if he needs to. He can play Vex if he needs to. He can play an AD mid if he needs to. He has so many different champions that he's able to play. And Keen is so solid on so many different top laners that this team is so strategically deep. And it becomes extremely hard to get a good draft against them because most teams are limited in what they are good at. So it's not really just about, oh, what is Gen G going to pick if you're playing against them in a best of 5? It's like game 5, what can we actually draft that we're going to be comfortable on, that we're going to be able to pilot? So I really like Gen G. I would just say the main thing that I'm worried about is their early games. In early games in a series, like the first couple games in a series, I think that those games get a little bit rough for them. A lot of times you see them start out really slow in a series. mega AFK. First 15 minutes, there's maybe 1 or 2 kills. They're dropping objectives, and it feels like it takes them a little bit of time to warm up. And we have seen teams do well with momentum at Worlds before. T1 is a great team as an example of this, where it feels like when T1 starts a series and they start playing really well early on in a series, you can feel them snowball that into the next games, that momentum. So that is something that you have to always be aware of on the Gen G side, is like, how do you make sure as that team, how do they make sure that they are still playing strong early games in the first few games and they're not getting too far behind in a series? I feel like this team, most of the time, they're going down 1-2. They can come back from being down 1-2, but it feels bad that you're always in that spot where your backs are against the wall. And obviously, we saw something similar when they played against T1 at MSI. So yeah, Gen G is still the best team in the world. I would just say that they need to go in with more intention in the first couple games, because it's harder to come back in every single series. I mean, you're always putting yourself in disadvantaged positions. So Gen G, #1 team in the world. I think they should win. I honestly hope that Gen G does win as well. Just personally, I've seen the team that has been the best team in the world, which was Gen G in 2024, JDG in 2023, lose at Worlds a couple times now. And I just want the team that's looked the best for the majority of the year to win for once, so that we actually have narratives that make sense. This community, that's more of a personal thing. You know, I'm not alluding to anything here, but I'm going to just throw that out there as well. The next team that I have in the expected top 4, and this would mean that I'm power ranking them as like a top 2 to top 3 team in the world, is T1. Now, they technically got 4th in Korea this split, but I do think that something that happened throughout the playoffs is that they ended up having to deal with teams actually being cynical and banning them specifically. And I think that going into Worlds, now that they've seen this happen multiple times in series, I think they'll have a better approach. T1 is a team that still has some flaws. I mean, Faker is not the best laner. He has relatively shallow champion pool. Keria is much better on his specific picks, as we've continually said the entire year. It is still true. His Poppy, his Bard, his Renata, his Nico, these are much better champions for him than if he's to just lock in Leona, Nautilus, one of these types of champs. But they still are a strong team. I think that a lot of times what they kind of get caught into doing is they feel like, okay, well, we need to play other things. Like we can't be this limited. But when we see them go to Worlds, they normally move away from this mentality of like, oh, we do kind of have to play everything. No, when they get to Worlds, they're like, we're going to play these types of champions. Now, it is Fearless, which is different than the previous 2 Worlds. So they're not going to be able to keep their champion pools as small. But I do think that they are going to still be one of the strongest teams. Owner specifically, I think, has been the best player on this team in summer. I think he's been extremely good. He's creating such good situations for his team consistently. He's simultaneously being the most active jungler in Korea early game, outside of maybe Peanut some games, while also maintaining his farm and maintaining his strength throughout games. So I've been really impressed with Owner's play specifically, and I think that they're going to be strong. I think that they will be top 4 in this tournament. Will they win? I don't think so. I don't think that T1 will win Worlds this year, mainly just because I think that they will end up getting caught in these game 4s, game 5s, and Fearless. If you look at how they end up playing a lot of these, later games, they're defaulting to things like Guma first picking Ziggs, where even though he can play the champion, it's not something that T1 is really good at. It's not Guma Zaya, it's not his Varus, it's not his Caitlyn when Caitlyn is really good and they're playing Caitlyn Lux lanes. It's not one of his bread and butter champions. It's something that is serviceable and something that he's willing to play. But it's just not an S tier pick for him. In games 4 and 5, I don't feel like Faker's getting on good champions a lot of the time for him. I do think that Faker is able to play more than just like 2 or 3 champions, obviously. But these game 4-5 picks that he ends up playing, like Faker Yone in a game 5, who believes in that? Who actually watches T1 and sees Faker lock in Yone in a game 5 and thinks they're going to win? Faker's Aurora is also not good, so that's an issue when it comes to how they end up drafting. It's like when you pick Aurora on T1, you normally have to put a top lane. So they definitely are limited draft-wise, but I think mentality-wise, this team will be strong and they know how to perform under the pressure of Worlds, which is really important. And it's something that I always factor into these types of rankings. Like, Worlds is a different tournament than other tournaments, and when you're a team that has played under pressure multiple times and understands what it's going to be like to travel multiple cities, lack of practice, shooting a lot of promos, not being able to play the game as much, this is going to factor into T1's journey throughout Worlds, and it's something that they've mastered. I feel like they adapt to this better than any other team in the world. So I do think that they will make top 4, but I'm not sure if they'll make finals. I think that maybe they make finals, but I would think that there's a higher chance that they end up 3rd, 4th this year than they actually make finals or win. That's my personal opinion. Okay, the next team that I'm going to put up here, which might be a little bit controversial, but I think that BLG has shown a lot recently, is obviously BLG. Now, BLG didn't show up at MSI well. They were pretty rough. Now they're using two different junglers. They're using Beichuan and Shadow. Feels like that has actually been helping Beichuan a bit. I feel like he's been playing better. And then Shadow, who's been playing the majority of the games now, has been really good, in my opinion. I think that he's completely changed the way this team plays. He's similar to Shun in the way that he has extremely good mechanics and he's very good at fighting, which is something that I felt like BLG always did as a team. That was something that was a hallmark of BLG gameplay, is sometimes they're just going to want to hands check you. Be 1k down, but they are going to want to hands check you. They just want to fight. And I feel like Shadow buys into that really well. And I think his champion pool has been on point. You know, he can play everything that they want to play. There's a few things that I think has made this team significantly stronger from when we saw them at MSI. One would be that Bin is playing a lot of the more stable picks better than he was before. He's not like the best Ornn in the world. He's not Keen, but he can play Ornn pretty serviceably now. His Rumble has gotten a lot better, so that's a power pick for BLG. At this point, his Scion is fine. He's serviceable on the pick. And if he's able to have those picks locked down, if those are strong picks for BLG, it's always really nice for them, because once you start going into, you know, the Mbessa, which Bin has also gotten better at, Mbessa, Jax, Gwen, these types of picks, I feel like that's when Bin can really shine. A champion that he didn't play a ton of, but I think is always been a really good Bin champion that might be strong at this Worlds is Gnar. I think that he's going to be able to perform on a pick like that. Renekton has always been a good Bin champion. And then you can't forget about Jax, which has been buffed. It gets banned against him a lot still. I mean, even though he hasn't been playing it, it's a champion that people are always worried about, especially in Fearless. So I think that BLG will have a pretty strong tournament. You know, Bin's playing better, Knight's playing better. Their jungle situation seems way more comfortable for them. And they just have a lot of specific strategies that I feel like they are confident on, which is really important in Fearless Draft. If you've been watching BLG in recent times, you know that once you get into games 3, 4, 5, they'll almost always hit you with some Kha'zix game, right? Like that's something that you always have to be worried about. And it feels like they have this type of lane that they're willing to play into pretty much anything, and it can get them a free win in a series, or you're going to have to waste bans on it to limit what they play. So Onn's playing very well. Bin is playing better. Their jungle situation solved. I think that this is the BLG that most people wanted all year. They finally look, you know, confident. And this is the first split that they got it done. This is the first split where they looked like the best team in LPL. And they beat Top Esports, who's strong domestically. You know, Top Esports, they're probably going to just, you know, there's a reason why this category is likely underperform, right? Top Esports is probably going to embarrass everyone. They're going to make everything that I say about them in the next 5 minutes seem completely idiotic. People are going to think that I made it all up. I promise you, Top Esports was actually good. They were actually good at League of Legends domestically in LPL, and BLG was able to rise to the occasion and beat them, which you got to give them credit for. So I think BLG will get top 4 at this tournament. I think that they will be strong, but it's going to be hard for them to win. Really just depends on draw for me. I think that they could beat a team like HonWillLife, for example, in quarterfinals. I think they could beat, you know, the rest of the LPL teams, Top Esports, AL, but I still think they will struggle against a team like Gen G. Gen G is just too clean. They're too precise, and BLG still makes mistakes with leads. They make more mistakes with leads than T1 makes, more mistakes with leads than HonWillLife makes, make more mistakes with leads than Gen G makes. I mean, it is one of those things. They're a Chinese team that has that throw in them. So I don't believe they'll be able to close it out versus the top teams in the world. So like T1, Gen G, not sure if they would beat either of them in a best of 5 in semis, but I think that they could beat the other teams that could potentially get there. Now, the next team, it's been very hard to rank this team, but this is HonWillLife. So HonWillLife, I'm putting them in the 4th seed. Now, why do I have them in likely underperform? I just don't really trust them. I feel like if you've been watching HonWillLife this split, throughout most of summer, there was a lot of pretty glaring weaknesses. They don't seem very consistent in their play. I think Peanut played a lot better in playoffs than he did in the regular split, but still, he's not hitting that same tier as, you know, Winter. He's not hitting that same level of consistent performance. And he's always been a little bit inconsistent. If you go back to Winter, it was kind of, you had this mentality where it's like, you know, Peanut's going to be good for most of the series, and then he's going to lock in Zyra at some point, and he'll run the game down, and you'll lose that game, but you'll win the other games. When I look at HonWillLife, I was trying to like really analyze why I feel this way about HonWillLife and what has changed from when I consider them the best team in the world, where they won LCK and won first stand. What really changed? And to me, it's that Zika hasn't been special recently. Like when HonWillLife looks like the best team in the world, it's because Zika looks like the best player in the world, and he's willing to draft his Zika champs, like his Yone, his Sylas, his Akali. He'll draft them into whatever you have. If you blind pick Victor, he'll play Sylas into it. He doesn't give a fuck. And he will just find a way to be relevant within the game. He'll solo kill in this matchup. We saw this multiple times at first stand where he's just solo killing people as Sylas into Victor. It just looks completely crazy, but he's able to do it. And I just don't believe that he's playing in this form right now. He has rose to the occasion at Worlds before in 2022. Last year, 2024, I don't think he played great. I don't think he really showed what he was capable of. He didn't show the level that he showed in LCK finals that they won in 2024. So I'm not sure about Hanwha Life. When I have likely underperform, it's not going to be as harsh as top esports. To me, it's just, I don't think that we'll see the Hanwha Life that we saw in winter. I think that we'll get more of the Hanwha Life we saw in summer, but if they play a best of 5 against T1 in semifinals of Worlds, and this is kind of how I'm viewing it, who do I think will win? I actually believe that T1 would be able to clutch that out. I think that T1 has a better idea of what it's going to take to win those games than Hanwha Life does. And even though Hanwha Life 3-0'd T1, recently, I think there was a couple things that ended up going towards Hanwha Life's favor. What I talked about earlier with them having the good draft strategy into Keria, making sure that he wasn't able to just rally off his champions over and over again. They had a very good draft strategy against Keria. And they played solid early games into T1. There's also issues that I saw within those games. So, for example, one of the things that right off the bat caught my eye is that when T1 played against Hanwha Life, that was the game where game 1, Gumayusi played Kai'Sa. That's not something that I think T1's going to do again. I think in that specific series, they had this mentality where it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be easy. We'll take away some of Viper's champions. Once Viper is more limited, then Guma can fall back to the champions that he really wants to play. He can play his Xayah, he can play his Varus, he can play whatever those champions end up being. But it just didn't feel like that ever became the case. They locked in Kai'Sa in game 1. It wasn't really that Guma's terrible at Kai'Sa. He's just not special at Kai'Sa, where on other champions, he does look special. When he locks in Xayah, it's like, damn, that's probably the best Xayah in the world. When he locks in a good Varus game, like a good Varus spot, you feel that. Ashe is something that's coming back to the meta. That's supposed to be pretty strong at this World. That's what people are saying. That's a champion that Guma was always excellent at. That was a great pick for T1. It was something that they played support. It was something they played AD. Very good champion for them. And I think if they're able to play more within their own wheelhouse and not try to contest Hanwha Life champions and just play their own game, I do think T1 is fundamentally a better team, and I think that they would win a best of 5 against Hanwha Life. So that's kind of the bar that I'm holding them to. Likely underperform from Hanwha Life standards. If you're at this point, if you're a top 2 team in LCK going into Worlds, you should be expected to be a top 2 team at Worlds. Like, you're supposed to be some of the best teams in the entire world. I think Hanwha Life will not show that level of performance. So I see them making semis potentially based on matchup and then probably losing in semis. 3-1 to T1 or something like this. The next team that we have in this likely underperform category, I have Top Esports. Top Esports is such a hard team to rate. Obviously, they are known for choking internationally. They're known for being just absolutely disgusting when it comes to international performance, but they have played some of the best league in the entire world in summer. They were so fucking good in summer. Significantly better than AL, I would say. Beat AL pretty handedly, 3-1. And the thing about Top Esports is that when it comes to like how they set up a game where it's like, okay, we're going to draft Kalista Renata this game and we're going to path towards it. And then we're going to swap it this time. And then we're going to do grubs and then take Drakes. And we're going to set up the game in like a really strict and very like precise way. They're able to execute and get those leads extremely consistently. Maybe one of the best teams in the world from 0 to 15 minutes at creating and executing what their game plan is. And then they'll throw it in ways that no other elite team in the world will ever throw it. Other teams get a 4 or 5K lead. If they're an elite team, they get a 4 or 5K lead. It's routine. You got a couple Drakes, you got a 3, 4K lead. You're able to just play slow, play around the spawning objectives. Okay, Herald spawns, you take that. Oh, Drake is spawning, set up vision, play around that. But Top Esports will throw in the most disgusting ways. I mean, Jackie Love has been getting caught mid more than he's ever been getting caught in his career. I know people have this mentality that he's somebody who always gets caught mid. No. Now he's always getting caught mid. Now it's like extremely consistent the way this guy throws his leads. So it's hard for me to believe in them internationally because generally when teams go internationally, they're more stiff. So it's harder for them to create the leads that, they've been creating. But then on top of that, even if they get a lead, they'll give it up quickly. And we saw this at first stand. They had the same type of thing. So I'm worried about them going into this tournament. I, once again, don't think that we'll see the same Top Esports. I think that we can see a world where Top Esports makes top 8. I think there should be expected to make top 8. But what they do in that round, let's say Top Esports plays against T1 in a best of 5 at Worlds in quarters. Who's going to win that? I think T1 will win it easily. I think they'll win it like 3-0, 3-1. I think Top Esports will come out. They'll be playing pretty good early in game 1. Some bad shit will happen. They'll lose the game. Tilt, lose the rest of the series. Get them out of here. I just don't believe that they're going to be able to perform consistently enough to rise to the occasion of Worlds. And yeah, I don't trust them. It's not a player problem. Their players are good. In terms of champion pools, Top Esports is extremely deep. They play everything. 369 is a player these days where he's playing carries extremely well. can play the Gnar, can play the Jace, whatever you need, this guy can play. It's just there's something missing. There's some level of like grit that's missing and consistency that's missing from this team to allow them to win against the elite teams, the top 4 in the world going into this tournament, in my opinion. So I don't rate them that high. I think that they will probably end up in quarters, face one of the teams that's above them in this tier list, lose pretty hard, and that'll be it. So that's it. Those are my like top 5 teams in the world. Gen.G 1, T1 2, BLG 3, Hanwha Life 4, Top Esports 5. Let's go into the expected top 8. Now, I've been seeing a lot of people coping about AL recently. I've been seeing a lot of people saying, hey, this team is the only team from China that's been able to perform versus LCK teams the entire year, so they're expecting good things out of them. I'm expecting almost nothing from AL. I think they've been playing so much worse. Domestically, specifically, I think Kale has been pretty bad, and I think Shanks has been awful. Ever since the Shanks, like, allegations, or, you know, when he was exposed for harassing women in a Discord call or whatever it was. I didn't follow it that closely. I'm not trying to brush it off. I just don't actually know what happened, but I know there's something to that effect. Ever since Shanks fucked up and did that bad shit, he has been a much different player. Much different. Just looks uninspiring. Isn't getting the leads we expect from him. There's no big plays. He's just being okay. And the person that's been carrying this whole team has been Tarzan. Tarzan has been extremely good. I think Tarzan's been the best jungler in the world coming into this event. The thing about Tarzan is he plays all the champions, like everything. He can play everything. Where you look at some of the better junglers in the world as well. I don't mean better than Tarzan. I just mean some of the best junglers in the world as well, like Owner or Canyon. It's like you watch their Kiana, it looks sus. It doesn't really look real. Their Nefiris, they don't look as good as somebody like Tarzan, but Tarzan has been excellent at these picks. He's been one of the best junglers at everything, right? He can play Poppy, he can play all the utility champions. You know, if he needs to play Maokai, he can play it. If he needs to play the standard Xinjiao, Wukong, Vi, he's really good on those. If he needs to play assassins, he's good on those. He just has everything on lock. And that's what makes him such a terrifying player. I just don't think that the team has been gelling together that well. They just seem like they are lacking firepower. I mean, if Shanks is not going to be a mega elite player, and Flandre is kind of a weak side, good space creator in team fights. He's good at understanding when he should be at different places throughout the game, when he needs to leave lane, when he needs to front line for his team. Even though Flandre is really good at that type of stuff, he's not a threatening player the way that Zeus is a threatening player. He's not a threatening player the way that Bin can be a threatening player, or Guma can be a threatening player. You know, any of these other players can have those games where they really pop off. It's more that just Flandre will do his job and he'll be consistent throughout the game. But if Shanks is going to be another weak side player and you're relying on Hope and Tarzan to do everything for the team, and Kale's engages are kind of sus, how are you going to win these games? And the fact of the matter is that they just aren't winning a lot of these games, right? They're having a tough go of it. They lost to Weibo 3-2 in playoffs. They also lost to Top Esports 3-1. Game 4 was pretty close. I mean, I felt like they should have won that game, but they ended up dropping it. There's something missing. The magic of AL is gone, in my opinion. So I expect that they will get top 8, but I don't expect them to do much in quarterfinals. I think that they would lose to all the teams above them in a best of 5. The next team that I'm going to put in this expected top 8 is going to be KT. Now, KT is an interesting team. BDD, one of the best players in the world. He's completely insane this split. Kha'zix has also been pretty good. I just don't trust their side lanes. Flat out, I just don't trust their side lanes. No matter who they run. I mean, Perfect will probably be the one that's playing in this tournament. He's fine. He can play good games sometimes. He's just not consistent. And then Duckdom and Peter, I feel like that ball lane is just waiting to break. You know, Duckdom can be a good weak side player. He's good at playing without resource. I mean, when I say weak side, I essentially mean just not having resources dumped into them. But there's always going to be games that he will fall too far behind and, you know, he'll end up being useless in the game. And then Peter's probably the worst support coming out of Asia, I would say, at this international. So it's tough for me to expect them to do well. I think that if they get a good draft, I think they'll beat the teams that are much worse than them. For example, if KT plays against 100 Thieves, I believe they'll win 100% of the time. You know, like, I think that they're essentially just a better version of 100 Thieves when you look at the player lineup and the strengths of both teams. You know, strong mid jungle, other players are just fine role players, whatever. I think KT will beat 100 Thieves easily. I think they'll beat a team like Fnatic pretty easily. I think they'd beat Koi. I think they would beat PSG super easily. I think PSG is terrible. They'd beat Vivo Kid pretty easily. They'd beat Secret Whales. But are they actually going to beat any of these teams? Probably not. If they play against CFO, FlyQuest, G2, not sure how they would do versus those types of teams. So, also, where the fuck is FlyQuest? Am I doing this without FlyQuest? Where the hell is FlyQuest on this thing? I just realized, because I've been just doing the teams as I've ranked them. Am I ill, or is there just no FlyQuest? All right, let's redo this. Yeah, anyways, to finish my point about KT, I think that they're a relatively strong team. I believe in them to beat teams that are worse than them. I just have a feeling that it'll be KT things. They'll get a super hard draw. They'll have to play a bunch of these teams that are potentially better than them, and they won't end up making top 8 because of that, even though their expectations should be top 8. So the next team that I have in this expected top 8, which is actually going to be more than 8 teams, like I said before, these are teams that I think the expectation should be to get top 8, but obviously there's different brackets. Swiss is going to be difficult for some teams. For example, G2 had the hardest draw ever last year, and a team like FlyQuest had a relatively easy draw. So it's all going to be draw related when it comes to these 10 teams. I think the teams that get better draws will generally perform better. You know, it's going to be simple like that. But I'm going to have FlyQuest here. And I went really back and forth between FlyQuest and G2 because I do think G2 has improved a lot. And I think that the way that FlyQuest ended up winning LTA without really being challenged most of the time, and the way that they have reverted to being like ultra passive and just relying on only team fighting, I don't think is the way that you want to approach international competition. When I look at Eastern teams play against Western teams, I almost never see an Eastern team get a sizable lead and then throw. It's almost always that the Eastern team will, get cheesed or something, or there'll be a good lane swap or a good level 1 situation, something like that. And then the team that is playing against the Eastern team will be able to snowball that lead, and they'll be able to close out a game like that. There's a couple games that come to mind, maybe like game 1 of Hanwha Life versus KC at first stand would be an example of a Western team not doing that, being able to scale into the game and just playing a comp that they were, comfortable on, etc. So it hasn't always been the case, but I think that FlyQuest playstyle is not great at being able to beat the teams that are above them, but I think that it's good at winning games versus teams that you're better than. So for example, if FlyQuest plays against Fnatic, I feel like Fnatic could almost never win. If they play against 100 Thieves, I think 100 Thieves could almost never win. If they play against Koi, feels like Koi should probably lose. I think Koi might be able to win, but still Koi is pretty messy in the mid game. They have a lot of random deaths that happen. I think FlyQuest would be able to take advantage and win games against teams like that. But against elite teams, I think that a team like Hanwha Life or Top Esports should steamroll a team like FlyQuest. Now, who knows? Top Esports might throw the game, but they are good at creating big enough leads that I think it'll be very hard for FlyQuest to find angles to battle back in a game like that. I'll put FlyQuest here as the power ranked, what is this, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th best team in the world. Right after that, I have CFO, who I think is extremely similar to FlyQuest. Not as passive as FlyQuest, but I think that CFO is a team that really relies on team fighting, which is the same thing that FlyQuest does. The next team that I have on this tier list is CFO, who I'm going to power rank as a 9th, but I think they are pretty strong. Definitely could see them easily making top 8 if they get a favorable draw. I don't think they're quite as good as FlyQuest, but I think they're similar in a lot of regards. For example, CFO is a team that is extremely good at team fighting. They're a team that is very smart about how they take space, what everyone's different job is. Like when Driver is playing, I've noticed that the way that he frontlines, the way that he takes space in the fight, it allows other people to smurf really hard. I think Junjia is extremely smart about how he approaches games from a jungle standpoint. Very consistent and systematic in the way that he views the game, which is very similar to Inspired, to be honest. And I think that's probably where a lot of the comparison comes from. One of the differences is that Hongq is a complete freak, like in the best way possible. I think he's extremely good. One of the best laners when it comes to just pure laning. I mean, I think that he's probably better than every non-Asian laner in lane. And when I'm saying Asian, I mean the elite, Chinese and Korean mid laners. I think he's better than Quad, for example, as well. Super, super talented player. They have a lot of firepower there. Kaiwing's fine. We know who Kaiwing is at this point. He's going to play melee supports, engage supports pretty well. Not great on everything else. So that doesn't mean that he can't play something like Bard. He did play I believe he's played some Bard in finals. I watched their games pretty recently. Or maybe it was upper bracket finals where he played some Bard, and it was fine, but he just doesn't look comfortable on it. He's not as good as Busio is on those types of range supports. But solid team. Definitely could see them, beating anyone in this tier. I think they could potentially beat AL, KT, FlyQuest. Think that the teams above them should be hard. But I mean, they beat Top Esports before. You never know how bad Top Esports is going to play internationally, man. You never know how bad Top Esports is going to run it internationally. So CFO, solid team, good strengths. They are consistent on how they approach the game. They have good structure within their team, good team fighting, solid team. I think that they're very good. The next team that I'm going to put here is G2, who I also think are good. By the way, all these teams, if you're in this tier of expected top 8, I think you're an excellent team. You're not as good as these teams, but you're an excellent team globally. And G2 has gotten a lot better. G2 has gotten so much better, man. Like before, when I would watch them, I thought that they were completely like ill about their priorities. If you watch them, what was it, in spring? I guess I was going to say early on in summer, but it was more like in spring. They had all these weird vegan drafts where they were essentially just AFK. They're drafting like Mundo early. If you picked any type of AP jungler, they would just draft Mundo, not give a fuck, farm it out. Like hopefully nothing happened in the game. Every game was just super low kills. And they would just slowly try to bleed you out. They kind of look like a bad, or I guess I should say a bad version, but they looked like those bad NA teams that used to win NA, like the TSM in 2017, where they were just mega AFK, but no one was able to beat them. They had that vibe to them. And I feel like G2 really changed this. They became a lot more active in how they play the game. They're a lot smarter about how they're going to snowball a game. And, you know, they have the crazy picks going more into the BB basket, like his Kled, for example, which I think is the better way for this team to operate than to have like Skumon playing these types of like AFK farm junglers, which he's good at, but I think that he's become so much better throughout the split. And I think by the end of summer, I thought he was just the best jungler in EU. One of his special picks is now Volibear. It's something that's been played a lot within European solo queue, and Skumon's the guy that's really been playing it a ton within the LEC. Performed really well in it. He obviously had that invade that ended up being super good versus Elyoya in finals, because Elyoya, for some reason, decided to contest red buff down smite. Don't think we're going to see that out of the other teams here, but I do think that this team can punch up. I think G2 has the best chance out of these three teams of beating a team like Conman Life or Top Esports. But I do think that if G2 played against CFO or G2 played against FlyQuest, I would favor those teams against G2. So it's very hard for me to rank G2. I almost put them above FlyQuest. I almost put them in the middle here. I'm just going to leave them here, but these teams are extremely close in skill. I think all these teams are very good. And yeah, G2 has improved a lot. I don't expect them to get 3-0'd by FlyQuest the way that they got 3-0'd at MSI. I think that they didn't have what they have now. They didn't have the structure. They didn't have the confidence. They kind of just locked in champions and were like, I hope we win. And a lot of the ways that they ended up getting ahead would be things like Caps' side laning. He was one of the best side lane players in the LEC, so he would understand when to commit to just pushing as opposed to joining a fight, and that was times where G2 was able to find advantages. Still, they didn't have a lot of like good game plans back then, and now it feels like they have a lot better game plans. So yeah, shout out to G2. I do think that they're very strong coming in. So these are teams, like I said, it's more than 8 teams from 1 to here. It's 10 teams. But I do think that all these teams should expect to get top 8, and it's just going to be based on draft. Like who ends up getting the harder draw. Teams with the harder draw won't make it. It'll probably be G2 and KT will just get fucked, and then these teams will end up going to top 8. That's probably what will happen, but yeah, you never know, right? Okay, expected top 12. So here are the teams that I think should be top 12. So here I will have MKOI, and then I will have Fnatic. So these are the teams that I think should be expected to be top 12, which means that they'll get eliminated before the final day, or maybe even on the final day. I just don't think that these teams have enough. Like, Fnatic is too slow. They're way too slow to play against any of these teams. I think that they're too slow, but their macro is not good enough, and their team fighting is not good enough to beat the teams above them. I think that Fnatic versus FlyQuest would be a dream matchup for FlyQuest. I mean, that should be one of the best matchups possible for FlyQuest. Fnatic is not the same Fnatic as before, and they're really dependent on, is Oscar going to show up and play like he did versus Kana, or will he end up, not being great? And just being the Oscar who he was for most of the year, where he's just fine, general weak side top laner, falls behind in a lot of lanes. Poby is another player who doesn't take a lot of risks. He's good at farming side lane. Razork has mellowed out a little bit. He's trying to be more consistent. It just doesn't feel like this team has anyone who's going to really create enough variance for you to beat teams that are better than you. And I do think that Koi is just a better team than Fnatic. When they played against each other, Merwin obviously played really well, so we'll have to see how this matchup goes. I think that MKOI, they're really hard for me to judge because this team has potential to do better than this, but in summer, they were not great. I think JoJo's laning is probably the best in the league in LEC. He's extremely good in lane. I think Elyoya played a lot worse in summer finals and just playoffs in general than he did in spring. In spring, I thought Elyoya was... He almost reminded me of like Owner this split with T1, where he just knew where to find early ganks, where to find pressure, where to get kills, and he wasn't getting punished for it. It was like he was ganking and farming at the same time, and Skumon was just only farming, and then MKOI would just get leads, and they would end up winning the games versus G2. This split, it felt like he was kind of out of his element. I don't think he played the meta that well. Even when Kiana came back into the meta that used to be an Elyoya Classic, they had a big lead with Kiana didn't end up closing it out. Then they didn't really play it after that. It just feels like Elyoya was not the best version of himself. And that's kind of how Elyoya normally is. He's a streaky player. When he's playing well and he has like a lot of confidence, he plays extremely well. Like some of the best early games you'll see. And when he's not feeling himself, he's almost like Peanut in this regard, actually, a little bit, now that I'm thinking about it. He just kind of looks like mechanically worse than the other jungler. Like he's kind of just AFK, not really doing anything, which is different than a player like Razork, right? When you think about a player like Razork, normally it's 1v9 in the game or just completely fucking aggressively inting the game. Elyoya doesn't int the game when he's not playing well. He just doesn't do anything when he's not playing well, which is maybe better. Who knows? But still, MKOI didn't look as cohesive as they looked in spring. They've fallen off a bit to me. Okay, now we go to the no shot category. Here we have Team Secret Whales. Secret Whales. Okay, so they're a pretty fun team. I liked watching them play. I watched them play in PCS playoffs. They're a fun team. They're super young. They're a super young Vietnamese team. They're really fun to watch. They have good mechanics. They fight a lot. Kind of dumb about the game, not gonna lie. They're a little bit stupid about how they fight, and they do some really egregious things. But they are like a good vibing version of a Viet. They remind me of like Saigon Buffaloes, maybe like these types of teams that have came out of VCS before. Obviously it's LCP now, but you get the point. This team is fun to watch. I just don't think they have what it takes to beat most teams. Like they could take games. Maybe they could beat a team like Fnatic. Now that I'm thinking about it, they could outhand Fnatic. They could outhand Koi. They could beat these teams above them. But I think that the teams in the expected top 8 tier, very hard. I mean, we watch CFO play against a team like Team Secret Whales. It kind of feels like if Team Secret Whales doesn't win the game super early, it's doomed. CFO is just going to close them out. You know, it's kind of the same way that when another team plays against FlyQuest, if you see 100 Thieves play against FlyQuest domestically, you're like, okay, if they're smurfing, they can win a game. The second that the game becomes even going into a mid game, they're cooked. I feel the same way about TSW here. So decent team. I like them a lot more than PSG, but I don't think that they have what it takes to beat anyone in the top tier. So I don't think there's any shot that they make it to top 8. I think it's almost impossible for them to make it to top 8. Maybe they could make top 12. Maybe they could punch above their weight and, you know, beat a Fnatic, beat a Koi. Maybe they could win their elimination best of 3 at the bottom of the bracket for 15th, 16th place. I could see that, but not a super scary team going into Worlds. Now here, I'm going to put 100 Thieves. So 100 Thieves, I don't expect much for them this tournament. I don't think that they're that great of a team. Quid also is a player who generally performs a little bit worse when the pressure's on, and pressure will obviously be on at Worlds. We know who 100 Thieves is. They have a really strong mid jungle. Dokla is just going to play weak side top. FBI is going to play some type of champion that scales or is going to be relevant within the game, and they're just going to farm. Then Ayla will try to play some type of engage, and he'll just do his job within the team. I think that they've already maxed out. The 100 Thieves that we saw that end up losing to Vivo Kid, I do think that they are better than Vivo Kid, and they had an off day, but not by much. They're the same tier of team. I just think that 100 Thieves has already maxed out. So there's this, and then there's also one thing that I'll say here. This is kind of more of a prediction as opposed to, you know, just hard rankings. Vivo Kid is having horrible situations with their flights. Like they're not able to travel at all. They're going to be on 2 days of scrim. So I think Vivo Kid will probably just be the worst team at this tournament. I just think that they, you know, didn't get a chance really to, you know, perform. So I guess we'll throw that there. This is going to be 16th place for Vivo Kid. They're a fine team. They are good enough at what they do. You know, they have a solid roster. The jungler on the team, how do people pronounce his name? I always call him Decimus because I used to watch him. I mean, I watched him when he played LTA South and CB LOL the previous year. So that was before there was English casters, or I wouldn't watch the English caster. I call him Decimus. I think he's a pretty interesting player. I think he's solid at carrying out his leads. He knows how he wants to win a game. Just not as good as the other junglers that are above him, in my opinion. And they're going to be in horrible form because of the flight situation and the lack of practice. I think it will really play into how they play. And then this team PSG, they're really uninspiring, bro. PSG is a very uninspiring team to watch. I don't know why I don't like watching them play so much. I think the reason when I really think about it is because a lot of the players on their team, like for example, if you don't know who this team is, this is the Karsa Maple Betty team. From LCP, they just look very uninspired. They're all just kind of washed, I would say. Like, I know it sounds fucked up, but the team is generally just kind of washed players. It's all, you know, PCS players that we've seen before compete for a while, and there's nothing inspiring about the way they play. And Karsa himself is just like a full facilitator type player at this point. Lost the hands diff and all this stuff. For being an MSI champion, it's just not it. So it's hard for me to say anything good about PSG, if I'm being honest with you. I just don't really respect the way that they play the game. They look like, for example, a bad NA team. Now, they could beat 100 Thieves. They could beat Team Secret Whales, even though they lost them. They could beat them. I wouldn't put that past them. I just don't think they're beating any of the teams above them. Boring team, uninspiring, not expecting much from them. And then the team that I will put in 17th place, the reason this team is no shot is because they're going to get 3-0'd by T1. Let's be real, bro. IG, there's no way Wei is winning a series versus Owner at this point in his career. I refuse to believe it. You know, the Shy he's not inting as much as he used to. He's just whatever to watch, man. He still has some egregious games sometimes. Rookie this is the worst form of Rookie ever, maybe. Like, he's just not Rookie anymore. The team is essentially the Gala show. Either Gala 1v9s or they lose, and there's no way that Gala is going to be able to win 1v9 3 games versus T1. So, IG is probably just losing to T1 3-0. I would be super happy if this doesn't happen. Hey, I'm rooting for IG. If IG ends up beating T1 3-1, 3-0, 3-2, whatever it is, I'll be the happiest man on earth. But I don't think it's happening. Just pretty uninspiring team as well. You saw a big fall off from them in playoffs. I mean, they got smacked around by Top Esports. They got smacked around by Top Esports. They got smacked around by AL. And these are teams that I consider to be weaker, if not much weaker than T1 who they're playing. So I think it's completely cooked for them. They're not going to make Worlds. It's nice that they are going to show up. I mean, technically they made the Worlds play-in. They're not making it, bro. They're completely cooked. They're out. So yeah, that's going to be my tier list, bro. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next video.